Hello everyone and welcome to the very first Stories from Styx Direct. As we continue expanding the universe that we're building, one obviously inspired by the stories of Greek mythology, we want to make sure that you are all along for the ride and in the loop, so let's get started. Now before we dive into news about part 2 and beyond, let's dive into a little bit of the world building and storytelling in Stories from Styx. Now as previously announced, Stories from Styx is not just an anthology or a musical or whatever you want to call it. We're building a world through comics, novels, short form animatics and more just to enrich and expand the SFS-niverse. That sounds kind of shit. We're not going to call it that. One of the most unique elements that we're introducing into Stories from Styx, and what is arguably the biggest jump from the source material, we are of course talking about the god's semi-omniscience. This concept, known amongst the divine as Threadview, allows the deities to glimpse into the threads of fate. I could spend like 10 minutes explaining what the concept is, but I'd rather show you this incredible comic-style animatic made by SiMoon with his team Smoolio and Yakowo. Please enjoy.
In the Stories from Styx universe, the gods are semi-omniscient. They don't see every moment in perfect clarity, but they perceive the shape of destiny, major events and turning points unfolding like landmarks on a vast road they are destined to travel. This perception is known among the divine as the Threadview, a glimpse at the tapestry woven by the fates, offering clarity not in detail, but in direction. They know what must happen and when it must happen, but not always how it will come to pass or the full cost of reaching it. To deviate from this path is to resist the pull of fate itself, an act of defiance that risks unraveling the natural order. The gods are bound to their roles as much as they shape them. For example, the Olympians are fully aware they will one day overthrow Kronos in the Titanomachy, yet even in that moment of victory, they carry the burden of foresight, knowing their time will fade, that their myths will evolve, and that the world will one day see them through the distorted lens of modern memory. Hades in particular struggles with this. He knows he will be remembered not only as the steady, just ruler of the dead, but often as a villain, or a two-dimensional romantic interest whose perspective is lost to love, misunderstood for generations to come.
Now that you guys know this, I highly endorse going back and listening to SFS, Hades, and Persephone with this new layer of world building in mind. Now that we've done some world building, let's talk about part 2. First off, when I started marketing Stories from Styx, I did make it seem like it would be closer to a traditional musical, which is not the case. Stories from Styx is better described as a themed concept album or a musical anthology, with each piece adding to a wider mythological world. However, because of the sheer amount of work, time, and cost, and also a fair bit of burnout, I've made the decision that part 2 will not release all at once. We will do 6 singles spread throughout the foreseeable future. That of course means that we won't be dropping a full EP all at once, but that we'll do one story at a time. And since part 2 is 6 individual stories for world building purposes, it actually makes sense to release them as singles rather than part 1, which was more of a coherent story. Right now I don't have a set timeline when it comes to the releases of the 6 songs, but I hope that you guys understand that this is something I have to do, both to prioritize my mental health, but also to give all the songs the care it deserves without burning me out in the process. Speaking of part 2, let's talk a little bit about Tantalus and of course auditions. For those of you who have auditioned for Tantalus or have been following the process, we will be closing auditions for part 2 on June 16th. Tantalus is of course the only non-cast role for part 2, but if we continue Stories from Styx down the line, we will of course cast more people. Callbacks will begin shortly after, so please get your auditions in before June 16th. If you submitted an audition, it is very important that you follow me on TikTok because that is the only way I can reach back out to you to make sure that you know that you've got a callback and what the callback is. Of course, I'm one guy running this entire process, so I will not be able to respond to all 200 plus auditions, so if you've not heard from me by June 16th, that sadly means you did not make it into the callbacks round. But I do genuinely appreciate your interest in the Stories from Styx and that you took the time to audition. Maybe in a future part. We're getting towards the end of the very first Stories from Styx Direct, but we have some incredible news. The very first song of Stories from Styx Part 2. I think instead of telling you, I'd much rather show you this trailer by the incredible team of art director Smoolio with Gigi, AnniFlamma, and Camalemsy featuring Lydia the Bard. Have a look.
Hold your breath, my son.
The very first song of Stories from Styx Part 2 is titled Achilles Lullaby. Pre-saves will be in the pinned comment on YouTube or on any streaming platform that you prefer. A massive thank you to all the people who are currently working on part 2 that includes artists, writers, and of course, producers. Thank you so much, I could not do this without you. And of course, thank you to the incredible fandom. Stories from Styx, as I'm recording this, has 3.5 million streams on Spotify and has been received by love, care, and gentleness, and all the positive words that I can think of in my tiny little brain. As SFS progresses, we'll have so much more to share as we continue building what we hope is going to become a vast, moving universe of stories, art, and reimagined history. Thank you so much for tuning into this direct, and I will see you next time.